According to Career Builder's 2015 hiring forecast, the U.S. job market is turning a corner as caution gives way to confidence. More than one-third of employers expect to add full-time regular staff in 2015. That's the best outlook from the annual survey since 2006. Now that employers are facing a more competitive market that favors job seekers, should candidates and employees change their negotiating strategies? I'm Grace Trafton of The Better Part. Stay tuned and hear what our guest has to say. Dr. Tracy Weiland is a prominent thought leader on the impact of technology on society, work, and careers. She is a global speaker, media contributor, and the author of 11 books. Her newest book is called Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. Welcome back, Tracy. So good to have you here again.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
First, tell us what exactly is a candidate's market versus an employer's market?
Right. So, Grace, it's all about supply and demand. So let me start off with the employer's market, because we've been in that for a long time, as you mentioned, since 2006. And that's when employers have very few job openings, but we have a lot of candidates who are vying for jobs. So in an employer's market, they sort of have the pick of the lot. They may take their time in interviewing candidates. They may interview many, many candidates, and it may take a long time for a candidate to actually get an offer. Now let's flash forward, and here we are in 2015. Career Builder says the market is changing. Recruiters are telling me it's now moving towards a candidates market. What that means is there's more jobs open, and now they're looking for candidates to fill them, but candidates may be getting multiple offers. So the velocity now is changing, and candidates may have more opportunities now than in the past. And that's why I think it's a good time for us to look at, during a candidates market, what opportunities are inside the firm and what opportunities are outside the firm.
So what are some of the things that an employee should think about to negotiate a salary increase at work?
Right. So at work, I think it's very important that employees absolutely know their worth. That's number one. And there's so much information available in the market today. You can go to the salary surveys from Robert Half, Dice. A lot of the recruiters post them. You can go to vault.com, salary.com, glassdoor.com. But it's very important that employees understand what their skills and competencies are and what the going rate is, because they may be thinking about salaries from the past, and they may not be up on what am I really worth in today's marketplace.
And you've also said that employees should keep metrics and proof points of success on themselves. Why don't you explain to us in more detail about that?
Yes, you know, I've managed a lot of groups over the years, and that is a key point that I always say to my employees. Keep metrics on yourself. Make it easy for me to promote you. You know, my mind is in a lot of directions as I'm managing groups. So what does that mean? Every day, did you add profit? Did you decrease cost? Did you innovate in some way? Did you improve a process? If you've done it, write down one a day, but also quantify it, right? Give me some dollar value to what that process improvement means, or what that increase of customer satisfaction means, because then it makes the dialogue around salary much easier, right? Once I understand how you can quantify it. And I think that if you can help your manager by filling out the forms, pretty much you're giving them the dialogue that they're going to have with their management or HR to really go to bat for you. I think that's important. So make it easy for your manager to promote you and give you a salary increase by quantifying metrics every day.
So that means making it measurable.
Measurable, and also in dollars. You know, dollars are very powerful because it shows value.
Very powerful in everything.
Yeah.
So many firms have grade ranges for their various positions, and how important is it to understand this kind of salary structure?
Yes, particularly in large companies, and I've worked for a number of large companies where you have grade levels. You could have a grade 10, and grade 11, and grade 12, or 20, or 22. And what it means is they're sort of putting a bandwidth around competencies and skills for a different job. So let me try to explain in simple. Let's say that a full marketing manager job is worth $100,000. And you come into a firm and they say, well, you have 65% of the skills and competencies before you reach 100%. So you will come in at 65,000. Once you reach 100%, then you'll move up the range. Before you get promoted into the next range, some firms may have a competency that will go up to 125%. So you may be still in the range, but it's obvious that you're at 125% or $125,000, and now you're ready for the next level. I think it's important for employees to understand this. You can sit down with HR, your manager. Many publish it online on the internal website to say, what are the ranges? What do I need to know? How do I move up a range? How do I get promoted to the next level? Without understanding this, it's very difficult to have salary discussions.
Now, a good manager should actually keep their employees informed about what they should do to move up to the next level. Is that?
Well, it's per se, right? You would say that if you're a good manager, you would be constantly communicating with your employees so that they know. If you're a diligent employee, you would also be very proactive in understanding this and asking your management and HR. Many companies today will publish information on the internal website, and it's really the onus upon the employee to also go and investigate what needs to happen. What do I need to do?
Mm-hmm. And how about understanding the annual or biannual percentage increases and how they're calculated?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I had a colleague of mine call me up and said he was so disappointed with his raise because he only got 3%, and this was last year, and he thought he did very well. Well, I asked him, have you investigated what are the annual percentage increases for your industry in 2014? Well, as it ends up, it was really 2%. So he, in essence, was actually getting a higher promotion raise than his colleagues. But in his mind, he was thinking it should have been
Right.
5 or 7%, which years
Right.
ago was the range. So I think it's important that you frame your dialogue with some intelligence, that you understand what is the annual raise, what is the company offering for high achievers or on the low end or, not at all. Some companies had 0% in 2013, 2014. It didn't mean you performed poorly. It just meant that there wasn't money to go around that year.
So, that brings up a good point because even though it's more of a candidate market nowadays, the salary increases have only gone up about 2%, I've heard recently.
That's right. I think people need to understand also by industry, right? So high tech is doing incredibly well right now. We live in the high tech community. Salaries can be very robust. There could be other bonuses offered, stock options offered, a lot of incentives for people who have the skills that are in high demand. You know, remember, the marketplace is all about supply and demand. Do you have the skills and expertise that I need at this moment of time? If you do, and you're in scarcity, you're going to get a lot more money than someone who
Right.
has an abundant skill or expertise.
So that 2% is really just a very general number,
Yes,
average number.
and I think people need to look at that, look at the firm, look at the industry, look at the salary surveys, look at their own skills and competencies to be able to assess where they should be.
So what advice can you give to employees on how to frame a salary or a promotional discussion?
Yeah, so I think this happens a lot also in large companies, particularly with these grade ranges and bands, is that you're all of a sudden in a sequence that every year this is what you're going to get. But the market has actually moved ahead. So if you've done your research, right, and you know where you should be, and you feel that you're not, have an intelligent dialogue about salary leveling. Did we forget that the market has moved, that my skills are in high demand? And actually colleagues in other companies, or, here's the data that suggests I should probably be leveled at this range instead of this range, and have that open discussion. I would not make it a combative discussion. I would just
Right.
I'm trying to understand, has the marketplace changed, and have we kept up with the marketplace?
And also, it's not just about salary, is it?
No, and I think this is the one thing that people forget, There are so many things that have value, right? It could be everything from vacations to stock options to bonuses. There's a whole variety of things that might have more value to you as an individual than to the firm. If a firm is locked in at a salary, a certain salary, and that's it, I would encourage you to start thinking about and looking for other things that have more value to you that you can ask for or suggest.
That's a really, really good point. So there are some people who are apprehensive about change, but I know that you've said in the past that change can create opportunities. So tell us more about that.
Sure. Well, there's three types of changes that companies will have. They may be in high growth, and during that time, a lot of jobs may open up, new divisions, new business units, new strategy groups or skunk work groups or different opportunities. And I tell employees, look for that and take advantage of it. Companies are also maybe in a recession or a downturn. They have layoffs. Interesting enough, openings open up with layoffs because they need backfill people, people who are willing to make a move and backfill. And the third one is that companies are constantly in reorganization, right? They may be shifting their strategy and therefore moving one division into a different direction. That also creates opportunities. So I think people should look for transition as an opportunity rather than backing off and getting nervous about it.
So what could they do to, take away their apprehensions about change?
I think networking is really important. I think keeping your eyes and ears open at all time, making sure that you're reading everything that the company is publishing, both inside the firm and outside the firm, so that you have an awareness, so that you can catch that trend, whether it's going up or down, and see how you can make it, make it a better opportunity for yourself.
You've been talking about women's role in the workplace, and in your book, Women Lead, your research found that women were excellent negotiators, but not comfortable negotiating their own salary and promotions. Why is there this discrepancy?
Yeah, actually, it was a very interesting finding of interviewing over 200 women executives and their comments about their colleagues and also their employees. And what they found is, and what they really stated was that women are excellent negotiators, particularly in business negotiations. But when it came to salary or negotiating for themselves, they felt that women were uncomfortable with this. And a lot of it had to do with perhaps on how these women were raised, that negotiating was a masculine skill for some reason, or it was viewed as being non-feminine or very aggressive, and that women were not comfortable or trained to be able to assertively dialogue on their own behalf. I think this is changing because I do feel it's a skill. It's not a gender trait at all. However, many women have been raised to believe that. So as that shifts, I think you'll see that women will be much more assertive about discussing salary.
Hopefully that's going to be the case, or is becoming the case.
Yes, and I think a lot of women are realizing that this is a dialogue. You need to make money. You need to make money for your family, for yourself, to be able to rent or own a place or a car, whatever your goals are, and that you are, your best advocate, and that it's important
Absolutely.
to develop the skills necessary to be your own advocate.
Absolutely. Well, first tell us more about women and business negotiations.
Sure, it's very interesting in the research for Women Lead because women and men both felt that you needed to have a woman at the table in business negotiations. And the reasons that they listed were very interesting because it's very modern day. The world is much more complex. The world is much more global. It isn't a very cut and dry negotiation anymore. And women understand how to listen. Women understand the bigger picture. Women are more inclusive. They felt in having everyone dialogue. Women could think out of the box and see more solutions where everyone could win. And that today is highly desirable traits and skills to have in our very large, complex global negotiations. And that's where I think you always want to have a woman at the table.
Now, is this an understanding of very many men in the workplace.
You know, it was interesting. A lot of our men who we surveyed also felt the same thing, that women had these skills and capabilities. Maybe, as some women said, maybe they developed it because they came from a large family and they were negotiating with their brothers and sisters. Or other women said maybe they developed that skill earlier on than men because they were in marriages and they had kids and they had to constantly negotiate. However it is, both genders have felt that women had these unique skills, and that these are modern day leadership skills and negotiating skills that are very important in a complex world.
That's good to know, because I think that has not always been the case in the past.
No, it's, you know, the world is shifting, and fortunately, because women are over half the workforce and women are moving into leadership positions, we're seeing how strong they are in the workforce today and as executives.
And what did women say about their own salary discussions and negotiations?
So women did say that they were uncomfortable about discussing their own salary, and mostly because it was how they were either brought up, or the perception of it being masculine and very aggressive. However, women today are much more aware of developing their own skills, that it is a skill, it's not a trait, and that they can go and learn to how to position for themselves, how to quantify, how to discuss salary discussions more comfortably than in the past.
So we've been talking about internal salaries and promotions. How about external salary negotiations and new jobs?
Yes, so that's also very interesting, because when you're negotiating outside of the firm, you may have a lot of information about the job. Let's say if you're working with a recruiter, or the company posts a lot of information about the job, or you may have no information about the job other than a job description. So I think it's important, in the same way that you do research internally, is you actually have to research the jobs externally so that you know how to position for it.
And when will the salary discussion most likely come up in the job interview?
You know, that's an interesting question, because every candidate thinks like that's top of mind. When are we going
Right,
to talk about salary?
right,
What you should be thinking about is, how can I convince them to hire me,
right.
so then we can have the salary discussion. But it's a good question to know about. A lot of times firms may have screeners. They may have people in HR who will first screen you
Right,
before you even get to an interview to see
right,
if you're in the running.
right.
So I encourage people to really understand what you're worth. Don't overinflate or come in under, but really try to see if you can come in at that range, and you know that they're expecting. So you may be screened out if you come in too high or too low.
Right.
With that said, a lot of times the salary discussion may come up in the first interview, at the end of the interview if there is interest, just to make sure that the candidate is in the ballpark, and signal to the manager that it's time to continue. It's time to continue on to future interviews.
So what happens if the employer is really serious about hiring you?
If an employer is serious about hiring you, you might note that they will call you faster in for a second interview. They may arrange multiple interviews in the same day for you, and they may move into discussions about salary, start dates, you know, ideas for the future. So I think you'll start to see the dialogue moving in a direction where it's very positive.
So it's important to begin with, not to screen yourself out at the very beginning when they're feeling you out about salary expectations.
That's right. And I think people need to realize also that no matter what job you're interviewing for, there might be 10 other people interviewing for the same job. And
Right,
so because you get the interview, it does not necessarily mean that you have the job. You may be one of 10 people
right.
invited back after screening thousands of people to come in and continue to interview for that job.
And what is the best strategy to take if you don't like the offer that you're being given?
Yeah, so some employers, and many I think will say to you, here's the offer, why don't you go think about it? Others, if you've already had the salary dialogue, may say, you know, we came in with exactly what you hoped for. If it isn't what you've hoped for, you may want to say, number one, oh, this is really interesting. It isn't exactly what I thought. I'd like to think about it. Number two is try to think up ways to make it work for you. Maybe the manager is constrained on budget. A sign-on bonus is one of these strategies. A sign-on bonus, by the way, is a way that you can make up the difference of the salary that you expected and the difference between what the manager offered, so that you're in essence closing the gap for that first year with the hope and expectation that the next year it'll be more in line. You can also think about other things to make up the differences. Some cases it could be more vacation, right? Because vacation days have value.
Absolutely.
And you can use this as a way to sort of close the gap.
How about performance bonuses?
Performance bonuses, salespeople often do that. If the salary that they were presented with didn't match what they expected, or even executives do this as well, is if I increase the productivity or sales or performance of my division in X amount of time, how about you give me a performance bonus? So it's again a way that you can close the gap of the salary offer with other valuable means.
So performance bonuses can have really a serious impact on your salary, actually.
Yeah, I think people need to get creative when it comes to money, because there are so many ways that you can make up that gap. If you really want to work for a company and they really want you to work for them, you're going to come to some sort of way to close the gap. And I think it's important that people don't always measure their worth in that one single number, because there are other instruments to close that gap.
Now, there's many other things to consider too, and especially for new college grads who are, maybe getting their first job. I think they're often too focused on the base salary, and they don't understand the significance of all these other factors to consider, such as stock options.
Oh, yes. I'll tell you a story. I left a company to go to Cisco. And I was so disappointed because I negotiated a lateral move and they would not increase the salary. But they gave me a lot of stock options. Well, that netted more than any salary increase, as you can imagine,
Yes,
right,
very
during our
lucky.
boom years. So I think you need to be open-minded that stock options, restricted stock units, employees' stock option shares that you can buy, all of this can have a much larger value. A second area that students don't think about is tuition reimbursement.
Yes.
And I think I've utilized it myself. First at Apple Computer, they covered a very large portion of my MBA. And I'll tell you, an MBA can be very expensive. At Cisco, when I moved there, they covered a substantial part of my doctorate. And that is a very expensive degree, plus of all the research materials that you need. That had more value to me than a salary increase, because you need to remember that when you have a salary increase, you could be moving yourself into a new bracket, a
Correct.
higher tax
That's
bracket,
right.
and
That's
you
right.
may not be bringing it home.
Right.
So think about other things that have importance and value to you.
Well, one area of importance for people living out of this area is the paid relocation and housing, because often candidates will almost faint when they find out how much housing costs in Silicon Valley. So having a housing allowance or paid relocation benefits is really, really important.
Yes, and I think that if a company says, well, we don't really have a relocation service, you can say, well, if I move myself, could you give me a cash award or lump sum to cover the moving costs for myself? Do you have a realtor that I could work with? Do you have corporate housing that you could cover me for a month or two while I get myself, either buy a house, rent an apartment, or whatever? And and help the dialogue of saying it is very expensive and it takes a lot of energy and cash to move. Can you give me an allowance in some way that would help me? Can you give me a car to use while I'm here, because, or at least cover the gas and
Right.
transportation for me?
Right.
There's a lot of things that you can actually offer to employees that actually saves them money out of their out-of-pocket.
Absolutely. And also another thing is telecommuting. Saves the wear and tear of going to the office every day. Maybe takes 45 minutes or an hour to commute.
Oh yes, I did a study with one of my organizations. I had 65 people who were virtual. And I asked them if they could measure their own personal savings and how much they saved by telecommuting, because they told me that they were so much happier because they could work in whatever hours. Well, the savings were incredible. Gas, food, clothing, babysitters, right? Elder care time. They had a whole long list of things that they saved on that had much more value to them than a salary increase. But when they wrote it down, they said, oh gosh darn it, I'm saving a lot of money every month by telecommuting. And I didn't, and all I was thinking about is how happy I was to have the flexibility. And now I'm realizing I'm saving a lot of money too.
Did you find that they were also more productive?
Yes, we did a time. I actually asked them to tell me when their most productive times were. And it was interesting. I had a third, a third, a third. A third were night owls. They were most productive after 11 o'clock
Oh,
because they stayed up all night.
oh,
A third were early birds. They liked to get up at 4 and 5 in the morning, and that's when they were the most productive. And a third was sort of that 9 to 5 mid-range people that you think of when you, in the workplace. That to me was very powerful because what I realized by the telecommuting, we tapped into people's productivity cycles that we, instead of assuming that everyone is at their best between 9 and 5. And so that was another benefit from just surveying people about telecommuting.
well, Tracy, our time is up for today, and thank you again for all your valuable information.
Oh, thanks for having me.
The Better Part is produced by volunteers at the Cupertino Senior Center. Absolutely no experience is required to join The Better Part. So if you would like to look into being a part of our group, please leave a message with the Cupertino Senior Center. It's a lot of fun to be part of a TV show. So check us out, won't you? Thank you for being with us today. I hope you found a lot of interesting information on our show. And please remember to watch us on YouTube and Roku. See you next week. Bye-bye.